Welcome to the Halo Forge epidemic. This is Psychoduck, and I am back with another design talk video. This one sort of continues along the topic I discussed in the first design talk video, which was all about BTB and squad map design. So this one's going to build off of a lot of the things I said in that video. I don't want to just repeat everything. So if you haven't seen that one and this sounds like a topic which interests you, go back and watch that before you check this one out, or you'll probably be kind of lost. Anyway, so the topic I wanted to talk about today is something which I sort of forgot to talk about in the first one, or just didn't get to, because it's kind of a big topic of its own, and that is how verticality works in BTB, or in these squad BTB maps. So before we even get into that, just to talk about verticality as its own concept, not in relation to BTB for a minute, I think it's pretty much generally agreed that verticality is something you want in a map, right? Like if you've been playing first-person shooters for long enough, you'd remember that it used to be there was no verticality. You could look left and right, and that was it. You couldn't look up or down, and it was actually a Bungie game that first introduced verticality, and you know, taking advantage of the fact that you can look left and right, up and down, is important. It spices maps up. It keeps maps interesting when there's actually vertical engagement going on. But if we think about verticality, a lot of us, I think, just think, oh, okay, that means make things taller. But verticality is actually about a bit more than just making things taller. And obviously, height plays a role in it, but it's not the core of what makes something play vertically, I don't think. So when I talk about verticality, what I mean is having players on different vertical levels engaging one another and being encouraged to move between those vertical levels. So if we look at a map like Construct, which is arguably, I think it must be the tallest dev map in Halo, you assume, oh, well, it's very tall, it must play very vertically, but I would actually argue that Construct doesn't play quite as vertically as we think, because on Construct, really what's happening is 99% of the engagements are taking place along the upper level of the map, where there isn't really engagement between various vertical levels. It's all taking place along that one level. And most of the vertical movement on that map is really just one way. You spawn at the bottom, you hop in a lift, and you go up. There's not really any movement back and forth between various vertical levels. It's just get up as fast as you can and then engage along the upper level. So in BTB, verticality is a difficult thing to toy with. And if we look at the history of developer-created BTB maps in Halo, there really isn't a single one that I can think of off the top of my head that really takes advantage of verticality. There are some with plenty of verticality for infantry, but basically none with that vertical gameplay extending to the vehicles. And of course, like I talked about in the last video, I think the whole goal of having infantry and vehicles together on a map is for them to be interacting as much as possible. So if you have all this vertical space that infantry can move in, but vehicles are just relegated to the ground level, it doesn't really work because, that interaction is lost. And if you can bring the vehicles along for that vertical movement, it actually spices up, of course the verticality adds a lot of depth to the infantry interaction, but it also really adds a ton of depth to the infantry-vehicle interaction, even if the vehicle-vehicle interaction doesn't always benefit so much, just because of the range of vertical movement on like a Warthog turret is pretty limited. They can't look super far up or super far down, so you gotta be mindful of that. And of course, I'm not talking about bringing like aerial vehicles along for the whole vertical thing, because obviously they can move vertically much differently than players on foot or ground vehicles can, and that's kind of a whole different story. But bringing those vehicles, and again, I'm mostly talking about the Warthog here, along for the vertical gameplay is something that's really important, I think. And it's easy to focus on a lot of the concepts I talked about in the first video and to kind of forget about verticality, because I was talking about, creating the interaction, making areas feel relevant for infantry and vehicles, and balancing travel times and whatnot. And you can do all that with like sort of forgetting about verticality, and ideally you don't want to do that. That was something when I was starting to look at this sort of thing, trying to design this sort of maps back in Reach. When I made verticality was something which I didn't even think about. And as a result, yes, S balanced the travel times and it creates the infantry vehicle interaction and areas which feel relevant to both, but it has no verticality for the vehicle gameplay, aside from like the banked sides of the roads, which are negligible, So a lot of the verticality we see in regular developer BTB maps is really just in the form of rolling hills. So if we look at Blood Gulch again, that map has all these rolling hills on it, but that doesn't really create vertical gameplay, right? Because yes, vehicles are kind of moving up and down, but they're not really engaging between clearly defined vertical levels. It's kind of a seamless transition. And if you're using like rolling hills as your main form of height variation on a map, you're probably not being as efficient with your space as you could be. Because again, if you want an area to feel relevant for infantry as well as for vehicles, rolling hills, you're starting to get bigger, which makes it less relevant for infantry in order to make it work better for vehicles. So there are ways to make it work well for both. So, like I was talking about S being sort of the baseline for this, where I kind of began experimenting with this sort of thing and how that lacked verticality. Well, it's interesting because bringing that verticality into these maps is a really big challenge, but it actually provides some really interesting benefits as well. So we can kind of look at that. So we know that infantry have an easier time of moving vertically than vehicles, because infantry players on foot can jump. They can just move through tighter spaces. It can take grav lifts, teleporters, whatnot to move vertically, etc. Vehicles need longer, smoother ramps and whatnot to move vertically. So it requires more space to allow vehicles to move vertically, which of course, a big goal here is to be efficient with your space. So you have to be careful with that. And there are a lot of challenges that come out of that, as far as how do you allow vehicles to move vertically and allow infantry to move vertically, and achieve all of the stuff I was talking about in the first video, but also to have the efficient use of space and whatnot with your verticality. So it's tough, but what's actually cool about it is you can use it to your advantage. So if we look at the map Panic Attack, which I designed several years after S and really learned a lot more about, Panic Attack uses a lot of verticality. So what's interesting about that map is that it allows infantry to move a lot more freely than vehicles. It does that through the use of verticality in the vehicle routes. So obviously there's verticality in the infantry routes, but they have much freer access to moving up and down, right? Because the infantry can jump up, the vehicle drop downs and whatnot. So that map has sort of these directional vehicle circuits, which force vehicles to go one direction, whereas infantry can use them from both directions because there are jumps and drop-offs for the vehicles. So they're one way. But what's interesting about Panic Attack is that for infantry to move from one side of the map or the other, they can kind of pick and choose if they want to stay up top, they can stay on the bottom, or they can do any combination of the two. In order for a Warthog to move from one side of Panic Attack to the other, it has to go up and then come back down. So one thing that's doing is it's just forcing vehicles to drive a little bit further, which again balances travel times a little bit, because they have to move further to reach the same location. So that balances the travel times with infantry. But it also forces them to go up and back down. And then when they're up, they're interacting with infantry on the upper levels. When they're down, they're interacting with infantry on the lower levels. And you also get some interesting vehicle-vehicle interaction. You get interesting interaction where infantry has a height advantage on a Warthog, and that Warthog is, in serious danger there. So you get lots of actually interesting benefits from doing this, even though it is very challenging, like I said. So using things like directional vehicle routes with jumps and drop-offs is, I think, probably the best way to achieve verticality in a map with vehicles. And, just being careful to not allow infantry all this access to vertical space that vehicles don't have access to is, I think, really important. Because if we look at more traditional BTB developer maps, we see a lot, fairly flat vehicle circuits with all this, like, infantry structure up above them. And, that's nice for infantry because you achieve that vertical gameplay for them, but the vehicles don't really get the vertical gameplay out of it because they're not moving up and down. But again, like I said, it actually has some real benefits too. So if you compare Panic Attack to S, S being a map without any verticality for the vehicles, a little bit for infantry, and Panic Attack being a map with verticality for both, I think you'll find that the whole map of Panic Attack feels more relevant for vehicles and infantry, whereas S, moving from one side of the map to the other on foot is a little more stale because there's less vertical movement. So, just combining this whole look at verticality with some of the other things I talked about from the other BTB design talk video is, I think, really important. Some of these concepts are difficult to really put into words, and they're definitely difficult to put into designs. But these are just the sort of things that you learn as you're designing this type of map. Sometimes it's by accident. So, like some of those benefits I was talking about with the benefits of verticality in this type of map are things which I really realized by accident almost. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Hopefully, if you guys think about some of this stuff while you're designing this type of map, it will help. Hopefully you find it helpful. I was really blown away by the positive response to the first video like this. I think it's really cool seeing all of these people start forging these squad maps suddenly, which take into account some of the things I talked about. So hopefully this video helps in the same way. I know there were a lot of requests for different types of design talks. I heard infection, mini games, whatnot. We'll try to get to those. Obviously, neither of those is my specialty, but we'll see where this series goes. So it seemed like you guys liked it a lot more than I expected anyone to, and so we'll see how this goes. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Let me know in the comments below if you found this helpful, if this spikes any ideas in your mind about BTB design or whatnot. And thanks for watching. This has been Psychoduck with the Halo Forge Epidemic. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye bye.